kill you. But I don't have to save you from this review, either. Welcome to Bargain Bin Saturdays. I apologize now for that horrible impersonation of Christian Bale's Batman. But I believe it sets the tone for how horrible this movie is for this week. A movie that is completely described as one of the most insulting pieces of cinema to ever involve people pretending to be Scottish. A movie so horrifying that it's described as being among the such legendary titles as The Room and Plan 9 from Outer Space in terms of how awful it is. That movie is, of course, Beneath Loch Ness, released back in 2002. But before I move on to discussing the plot, I feel the need to set your red flags with horror because of something I heard from multiple reviews of this film. According to these reviews, the only research materials used in creating this film was the movie Braveheart. It was a movie that forever burned the mental image of William Wallace defeating the British by shooting bolts of lightning out of his backside. It is apparently the only research material that someone thought they needed in order to make a movie about a monster that lives in Scotland. If this little fact about the movie is true, then it goes a long way to explaining all the various errors that occur throughout the movie, such as the police uniform, the glasses used in the bar, the nurses' uniforms, the vehicles having left-side drive, and several others. With that being said, it's time to move on to the plot. Plot-wise, this film starts with a Scottish scientist being killed in Loch Ness under mysterious circumstances. The movie largely implies he was killed by an earthquake. We then skip over to a man that runs a news network showering in front of one of his producers, where he tells her to get a good story or she is fired. She then pitches the idea of the Scottish scientist's death being part of some sort of massive conspiracy instead of a tragic accident, in order to draw in the ratings. For some strange reason, the CEO decides to run with this idea and tells her to get one of the Scottish scientist's old buddies, a Dr. Case, involved with this project. Of course, as soon as Dr. Case gets involved with the project, a large monster appears in the loch, which is then followed with attempts to convince the local police force to keep people out of the loch, which is meant with a sneer about the value of tourism. Of course, with people still fishing and swimming in the loch, it leads to several people getting killed. And of course, the movie then tries to fake us out with a large sea monster being discovered on the shore, so the police claim that the situation is all clear now, which allows me to then throw in the surprise plot twist that it really wasn't a monster, which leads to a strange old man with a grudge against the beast for killing his son over a decade ago, dressing up like William Wallace before donning a dive suit and blowing it back to Kingdom Come with some explosives in order to end the movie. All in all, the plot is rather stock for this genre. It rips off both Jaws and Jurassic Park in several places. But unlike those films, it has neither the tense atmosphere of Jaws or the sense of wonder brought on by Jurassic Park. It also doesn't help that the movie is poorly told and contains several plot points that are rather useless in the grand scheme of things, and could have just as easily been replaced with references to Adam West's Batman for all the value they add to this film. Of course, if you want to understand how the movie rips off Jurassic Park, just watch this little clip that doesn't make a lick of sense if you deal with a sea monster.
Yeah. Well, if you check the net, sir, you'll see that there are websites.
On the acting side of things, the movie is just a waste of your time. None of the actors provide a particularly compelling performance, and many of the so-called Scottish people sound like they're Irish.
Nothing serious, just some rocks and silt sliding around a bit.
So in short, it just feels like the actors were there to get a quick paycheck before moving on to a more worthwhile film with either a bigger budget or a better plot. Rather speaking, the CGI in this movie is some of the worst I've ever seen. At points it looks like something out of the Canadian show Reboot or a PS1 game. In fact, the awful CGI is probably the saving grace of this movie since it's so horrendous and obviously fake that I can't help but laugh every time I see it. In fact, I already could have replaced the CGI monstrosity with the shark from Adam West's Batman movie, and it would have been more convincing. And to demonstrate my point, I'll show you a short clip from the movie. Outside of CGI, the movie is largely alright outside of a few continuity mistakes with scenes of clear blue skies being intermingled with scenes of cloudy gray skies being blended together. But those are easier to overlook in comparison to the fact that this movie was largely shot in the United States, and to be more specific, it was shot around a lake in California, which is why the location doesn't look anything at all like Scotland through most of this movie. Before rendering a final verdict, I'd like to make a few suggestions for how this film could have been improved. One thing they could have done to improve the film would have been to take advantage of their low budget and just go all out with a campy feel movie. You know, like the old Adam West Batman. If you don't got a big budget, don't try to make a big budget movie. Do what you can and make the most out of it. And if you're gonna make, and you should just go with camp maybe too. That way you can just have some cheap laughs and fun. And everyone can just laugh at how stupid your movie is. My second suggestion, one I guess that went more in line with what they wanted to go for since they stuck with the whole monster thing despite the low budget, would have been to make the movie about Champ, the monster of Lake Champlain. By making the movie about Champ, it would have offered them a couple of advantages. One, they wouldn't have had to travel out to Scotland to do any shooting out there. They could have done everything in America, you know. Stay local if you can. It also meant they could have removed all those parts that are so offensive to Scottish people as well, so the movie wouldn't be considered one of the most offensive things to ever have people pretending to be Scottish ever made in recent memory. Outside of that, I don't really have any major suggestions for you that wouldn't be obvious, like better acting, better CGI. All in all, Beneath Loch Ness is one of the worst films I've ever watched, but somehow it's surprisingly easy to watch. I credit this mostly to how horrible the CGI is. It just always gets me to start chuckling when I see it. On the whole, though, I'd say this movie's only worth picking up if you're into bad movies, bad horror movies, or you find it for dirt cheap. And by dirt cheap, I mean 30 cents or less. It's not worth your money. Like, at all. Do not pay any big bucks for this movie, because you'll be sorely disappointed. It's only worth a cheap laugh, so don't spend a lot of money on it.